Telling a lie is like building a house of cards. It always starts with some version of the truth. That's your foundation. From that point, layers and layers of lies are all stacked on top of their foundation. And the focus is that top layer, the lie that serves their goal. But if you have enough time for those lies to grow, they become the word on the street. Now, that doesn't mean those lies are any more true than they were 10 years ago. It's more like people who've never heard anything different. Well, that's just all they've heard. But the thing about a house of cards is that at its heart, it's flimsy. And the layers of lies on top of lies puts a weight on the foundation that it only takes busting one lie that brings the whole house of cards down. Just like it did for Death Row.
Shook called a meeting. All the artists were instructed to come to this meeting, and certain security was invited, and I happened to be one of them. The meeting was basically about what happened, and the artists were drilling security about what methods we had used and what were some of our tactics, which I looked around and no one said it. No one was speaking up for security. So I was one of the few people that spoke up and said, wait a minute, we were instructed not to carry weapons. And none of the artists knew that. They didn't know we were instructed not to carry weapons that day. And it looked like Reggie wasn't gonna say that information to them.
My opinion of Reggie Wright Jr. was he's employed by Death Row Records to do a certain job. He's going to do what his employer has him do.
You wanted to make me security when I owned everything. Had your buildings, the 5 cars, your women, Reggie's name.
And when it comes to Death Row Records, you have to be careful about what you believe.
Death Row Records and Reggie Wright had 2 big problems on their hands at this point. The first one was that Vegas PD just weren't buying the whole Orlando Anderson narrative, no matter how bad Tim Brennan and Bobby Ladd were trying to sell it. The second problem they had was that Frank Alexander was unwilling to repeat the lie that he had been asked to tell earlier regarding the chain being snatched the day of the shooting.
Went down to Vegas. Me, you, and Malcolm, like, the statement that you gave about the chain and all of that, you know, with the additional information.
Now you have to understand the second part of the false flag. All the time Brennan and Ladd are running Vegas around with the Orlando Anderson narrative. Reggie Wright Jr. and Suge Knight are actively running interference with witnesses because they were Death Row affiliated.
Again, we're talking about a musical artist, a backup band, whatever. I mean, they're very mobile. They're from different parts of the country. And it's not like everybody lives in Las Vegas, so it's going to be easy because they all own a home and they're all easy to locate. Most of these guys didn't own homes. They'd go stay at family, friends, whatever. So we would try to get in touch with people, and you'd have to go through Death Row Records or whomever to try and locate them.
Unfortunately, that was the lifestyle at Death Row. There were people that were carrying weapons constantly, people that were involved in shootings and beatings and everything else, and officers are protecting the perimeter.
Other witnesses, though, who have since ended up deceased, you know, that we attempted to talk to that night, refused to talk to us. McDonald didn't have anything he wanted to say to us. Now he's dead. people that we talked to during an investigation in California, they're dead. I mean, yeah, a lot of people have died that were directly or indirectly linked to this investigation.
Do you see how this operates? From one side, they're feeding Vegas all this disinformation, and the other side is obstructing the investigation and telling people to avoid the police.
It was worth subpoena and all they did, right? No. Okay. They recommend you don't get subpoenaed, whatever that's worth. I don't know what it means, but that's what they told me to tell you. Who told you to tell me that? Okay, Reggie told me to tell you that, but he told me not to tell you that he said it. Now, he said, don't get subpoenaed, whatever you do.
Why is it that after the shooting occurred that you basically asked Frank Alexander to retell a narrative? I have the recorded phone calls, and to not get subpoenaed.
To not get subpoenaed? I was telling him to get subpoenaed. I wanted him to come to court.
If you lost and not get subpoenaed today, I think you'll be fine. Yeah, Reggie.
But Shug wrote me a letter, which the FBI got. It was like nobody had told him anything I was out there doing. And I came and saw him, and he was like, man, I thought you abandoned me. Nobody's telling me anything about you.
It's kind of hard to believe that Knight felt abandoned, being as how Reggie visited him almost 200 documented times in prison.
You'd have to go through death row records or whomever to try and locate him. Classic example, we ended up getting a lot of press about how Malcolm Greenidge said he could identify the shooter. We finally tracked him down to set up a re-interview, and he says, I'm not going to look at any photos because I can't identify him. Yeah, we got beat up in the LA Times over that. And I'm thinking, okay, put up or shut up, Ace. And, well, but again, Reggie Wright Jr. is the one that brought him to that interview.
I don't think Vegas understood how crooked death row was at that point, so they believed these Compton guys. Brennan was saying good things about both Wrights, so Vegas trusted them.
Truly, Tupac Shakur, I think I'd heard the name before the night he was shot, but I knew nothing of the person.
Russ Poole called it a false flag operation, and I don't see how you could call it anything else, especially if it's true that Reggie Wright Jr. was informing for the FBI and the LAPD. Was he also informing for Vegas? I mean, this is Knight's right-hand guy, and he's straight up snitching to law enforcement.
Phil Carson, I'm a retired FBI agent, and I'm here today to talk about the Tupac Shakur murder and the investigation that followed.
The problem I have is when you or others just blurt things out to try to promote a certain narrative and are factually incorrect. They're wrong.
Let me speak a little bit about Reggie Wright Jr. Reggie's made it very clear in a lot of interviews that he went from never working for the FBI to working for Dan McMullen, for working for L.J. Conley, who was my partner, and that he was an FBI foreman. So I'm not saying anything right now regarding Reggie Wright Jr. that he hasn't already said a million times over on a documentary or on a podcast or any type of interview. Yes, Reggie was working with the FBI. In this last interview that I did on his podcast, he stated that he only provided information regarding the corrupt mayor of Compton at that time, which is Omar Bradley. Okay, that's a flat out lie. And if anybody believes that that's all that Reggie provided, they're fools. Wake up, people, okay?
And you believe I was involved in
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I didn't say that you were involved. I didn't say you were not involved.
Okay. I said, but if you do believe that, let me just ask you this.
Sure, go ahead. Go ahead, Reg.
Why didn't you ever come knocking on my door and talk to me? You saw the 302s on me before, right? You know that I was an open book, cooperate. Why you never came and just said, hey, Reggie, I want to talk to you about these things.
You want me to?
I knew.
You want me to answer? Hold on. Oh, Reggie, if that's your question, do you want me to honestly answer it?
I've done my best to try to help Reggie cover for himself, tell him when to keep his mouth shut, and Reggie just goes on and on and on.
Yes, sir.
You sure? Because I'm trying to protect you from yourself here.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Okay. We did talk to you, Reggie, in its document, okay?
Reggie provided a lot of information. He was in a very high-level position of death row records. He was very aware of what we were doing in terms of investigations, numerous investigations on death row records and Suge Knight. We executed search warrants. He helped provide information. Reggie had a game plan, and he made it very, very clear that he wanted to take over death row records. Make no mistake about that.
This is what I'm trying to explain to you. Yes.
It's the policy of the FBI that we never openly discuss who our FBI informants are, and that's what allows us to have such a good relationship with our informants.
This is what I'm trying to explain to you, Reggie. Whether you remember things or don't remember things, I don't have control over. Okay?
Many years ago, the FBI had two classifications of informants. One was called a 137 and one was called a 270. A 137 informant was an informant that was providing information, but they weren't doing it because they were trying to work off, say, a drug arrest or some type of fraud investigation. A 137 could be just a person that was just had a conscience, was trying to do some community, like a community service type thing, just trying to help out law enforcement. We would not provide that person's name. If a judge asked for that person's name, we were not obligated to give it, and we would not give it. And that helped the FBI build a real strong trust. So if somebody came in and said, hey, my neighbor's committing this crime, and I've got young children, and I need something done about it, and I'll do whatever I can to help you guys. We're never going to ask that person to testify. We're never going to disclose who that person is, but we want people to feel comfortable coming to the FBI knowing that it's safe and secure, and we're not going to divulge their identity or anything like that, or where this information came from. That's a 137. That's what Russ Poole was with me. The other kind of informant is a 270. That somebody is, let's say they got caught robbing a bank, and they know about 10 other bank robbers because they helped participate in other bank robberies as a drive-away or something like that, or help try to plan, say, a bank robbery. And so they wanted to cooperate. And for that cooperation, we wouldn't promise them anything, but we told them it's mandatory that you're willing to testify, and then based on the information that you provide, the truthfulness, and the results from the information you provided, there's a strong likelihood that they're going to get some type of benefit from, whether a sentence get reduced or whatever the case may be. That's a 270. So it all depends on where you classify. If you're somebody that's trying to work a beef off, or you're just trying to provide information, to cut yourself a good deal, and you're not doing it out of the goodwill of your heart.
You understand that? You understand the distinction between the two, right?
Okay, yeah, I got you.
Okay.
The gist of what I got out of it was these people were employed by a certain company to do a certain job, and that's all you're going to do. You aren't going to divulge anything else about what has been going on.
But I'm going to add something to that. We were also instructed to lie. Should call the meeting. All the artists were instructed to come to this meeting, and certain security was invited, and I happened to be one of them. And when I got into the meeting, it was a meeting the meeting was basically about what happened. And the reason we were instructed to lie was because Reggie Wright told us not to carry any weapons. So by me just looking at what Reggie told me, I'm thinking that Mr. Knight was unaware.
It was quite obvious that information off some people, and people just kind of shut down as far as answering our questions related to that.
But there's a lot of things that you're saying today about death row and about Suge and about who committed murder or who could have been involved that are 100% factually wrong, and it's documented.
For years, even though nothing was going on in the investigation of the murder of Tupac Shakur, there was one voice out there that was keeping this narrative alive, and this was Chuck Phillips from the LA Times. Phillips was a Pulitzer Prize-winning author who many sources claim was also an inside man for Death Row Records. Unreleased recordings discovered after Phillips' death reveal that not only was Phillips completely on board with the Anderson narrative, but in his attempt to get Frank Alexander to testify, Phillips drops a bombshell that may change the entire complexion of the case. He claims Suge Knight stated to both Phillips and Death Row attorney David Kenner that he never saw a shooter at all.
Suge maintained to me and to Kenner and to the law enforcement that he actually didn't see it. And he couldn't identify because he didn't see it.
So you have to ask who's being honest here, Phillips or Knight?
Chuck Phillips came along because he was a award-winning writer. He had some credibility. And the first time he wrote it, it sounded really weird. But there was because of his credibility and because of who he wrote with. You thought about it, but it didn't make real sense because you gotta know it was bigger. And then one of my sons said to me, Chuck Phillips is on Suge's payroll. Oh, okay, then that's the end of that. Now when he comes back and he writes, because he called us to tell us he was gonna write it, that he was doing it, the first one. That Biggie killed Tupac, Biggie and what's his name, Puffy, and that now you playing off that rivalry, that so-called rivalry. Now he's back on see, because what he did there is what he did then, is he took a little bit of some truth and he put other stuff in it.
It's a street code to not tell the police, but why would you lie to your attorney? Maybe you wouldn't. As long as the name Orlando Anderson was in the news and the media, this is real convenient for Reggie Wright because no one's asking him about his culpability.
It's probably in your best interest that we move on to something else. You can trust me or don't trust me. It's not, because it's, you know what, it's no skin off my back. But I think we can now agree that yes, you have met with me. Yes, you have talked with me. Yes, I've met with your father. Yes, I know your background.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting. When the conversation was set up, I don't traditionally put two people together to have them sort of, for lack of a better word, parse out truth or narrative, what have you, right? I usually interview somebody and record it, and then I write to it. And so that particular night, you know, there was no real planning other than we were gonna talk to Reggie and sort of see what came out of it, you know? It's funny because I've done so much of this work and so many moments of it. I have to say, on that phone call with Reggie Wright and with Phil, I was actually surprised, confused, was shocked at the interaction that transpired, because two things seemingly happened. Is Phil, who up to that point had never really alluded to the fact that Reggie had worked with the FBI or the FBI group that was responsible for the death row investigation. But then you seemingly had Reggie admit it.
In fact, I mean, in some of these other interviews that you've done, you keep saying like, Phil Carson doesn't know shit about me. I've never met the guy. That's wrong, isn't it?
But I do know two things. One, there is not a word that comes out of Phil Carson's mouth that he cannot prove. And number two, Phil Carson is not interested in anything but the facts and the truth of what happened in his investigation. And so it's kind of funny if you look at all the other players in this who like to partake in social media, right? Like to partake in this back and forth. If you notice, Phil Carson isn't on Instagram. Phil Carson is not on Twitter. Phil Carson does not have a social media account, right? He went on the record in the dossier, and so it's laughable now that Reggie Wright Jr. has tried to talk himself out of this, okay? Where Phil Carson's partner was Reggie's handler at the FBI.
This is the first that I hear that, and if you, I remember LJ, and if you said you was his partner, then I met with you.
Okay.
Because he did have somebody with him.
Okay, we should probably, okay, I think we'll move on then.
So now you have Reggie Wright Jr. secretly snitching out Death Row Records, while publicly he's throwing Kevin Hackey under the bus for his work with the ATF.
So I have to say, I was almost an audience member and listening to this and just sort of going, well, this is crazy. This is another element to this. And to go further, you know, Phil has told me repeatedly they had an upwards of 5 FBI informants within Death Row. Mob James being one.
What happened?
About what?
Shooting a biggie.
I don't know anything about that.
You have nothing to give the feds.
I have nothing to give them.
Even if it meant shaving some time off.
Number one, I ain't that dude. I'm just not. But number two, I can't help him.
So to me, when I saw and listened to that interaction, it started to make a lot more sense. And it was the first time that you could go, Reggie Wright was an FBI informant.
I mean, you got to trust me on this. For your own safety, let's just move on to something else, then, okay?
I'm not worried about it because it's obvious.
Well,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's for your own good. Anyways, right.
Anyway. Number one, I ain't that dude. I'm just not.
What he was saying, and you can hear it on the phone, he was basically saying, hey, Reggie, I'm trying to protect you.
So Reggie Wright, he didn't say a whole heck of a lot, I thought. I mean, he said a lot in not saying it, but
Right.
he certainly wasn't very forthcoming.
I was a co-showrunner on that show, right? In the middle, or I believe it was either in the middle or before or after all of that questioning, Reggie went in the bathroom and threw up.
I was just interested in why he would point the finger at Suge so quick.
Because I was the one who wrote the questions for Soledad O'Brien and for Ice-T to ask Reggie. The thing with that show is, you know, Ice being Ice, he was incredible on that show, but he's very much a politician, right? So I would give him the easy questions to ask that wasn't going to cause controversy, and then I would give Soledad the journalistic questions, and those questions came from me. And everyone always tells the story about him throwing up in the bathroom of his house after saying what he said in that interview.
He wouldn't say it to you, but he definitely pointed it. We call that dry snitching.
Interesting.
There are dangers with informants, especially when their law enforcement handlers vouch for their credibility. There's always a possibility that an informant can take law enforcement for a wild goose chase. What we learned from the story of mob enforcer Whitey Bulger is that for years, the FBI trusted Bulger as an informant. Bulger used the trust of the FBI to feed them information, but it was information against rival gangs and not any of his own. Because they liked him, the FBI actually gave up names of informants in his own gang. Bulger misdirected the FBI for his own needs, and they even helped him stay out of trouble for years. It's really easy to see the similarities here. In this case, we see one narrative pushed to law enforcement while obstruction is happening on other narratives. And if you cross them, you're ratted out.
Please, stop playing with me. I know too much about you guys that walk around now with your chest all poked out. Because I play both sides. Both sides, you know that?
And you just have to wonder if the rats on death row's sinking ship were a bunch of mini Bulgers. It didn't matter. The Orlando Anderson narrative was the driver. And once they were inside, it feels like they were able to steer cops in Anderson's direction and away from anyone else who had anything to say on any other possibility.
Tell me, other than being a police officer? Other than being a police officer? Tell me what person that Reggie Wright went and got on the stand and testified against. Tell me, other than being a police officer, tell me what person that Reggie Wright went and got on the stand and testified against. I bet y'all can't come up with no writer.
Closer to the end, I didn't get to see him that much. We talked. I actually wrote him a letter when he was hiding out in LA. And people around him told me he kept it in his pocket for a long time. But I just basically told him some things that I saw when I was like meditating and in my prayer for him and his life, some warnings and then some great stuff too. But they said he would read it all the time. I was like, really? Like, yeah, he kept it with him. I was like, wow, I didn't know that. I think he got shot on like, two of my favorite numbers are 7 and 13. Yep. And I think Pac was shot on the 7th and passed away on the 13th when they declared him on the 13th. And I was so upset because I was afraid of the 13th. Yeah, and it messed me up, man.
I just personally believe that his death is related to us. And that's from what I've gathered when I was at New York, what I heard Pac tell Suge Knight, and what I heard over that radio that night after the shots were fired. I never did get over it. I think the only person I talked to about it was Frank. And to this day, I believe that that gotcha was inside the organization and not out.
Death Row Records was not the place to be in the immediate fallout from the shooting of Tupac Shakur because they had several big problems. The first problem that they had was that Las Vegas police were actually calling Death Row Records trying to set up and schedule witness interviews with the people that were associated with Death Row. The second problem that they had was they were trying to rush the Machiavelli album that Tupac had just made in order to capitalize on Tupac's death.
It was such a mess after, I get a phone call, hey, go to the mastering house and master the Machiavelli record. And I'm like, well, we haven't even mixed the thing yet, They're like, oh, just take the mixes that you guys did from the night of the sessions, which there's only 2 songs we sat down and mixed. So all that stuff is just, Tupac would have us run it off to that. So those aren't even really mixes. So when people say to me, wow, that's, that mix is unbelievable, I'm just like, it's not even a mix. That's live, going right to the DAT machine, never see the songs again.
And if that wasn't enough, 35 days after Tupac dies, an arrest warrant for Mr. Knight is issued for what happened at the MGM. And at this point, the only one who might be able to help Knight is the one they set up to fail. And he wasn't going with it.
Listen to what I'm saying. I gave a statement to Metro based on what you and Suge asked me to do that night I went to the meeting at Suge's house, okay, about the chain getting snatched.
Frank Alexander had already lied about the whole chain snatch. There's a concern that Alexander may not go with the program.
Now, I've already said that. Now, to go in there and say something different than that, that's going to jeopardize a lot. That's perjury there. Okay, this stuff is already on record.
After the shooting occurred on September 7th that evening, I don't understand something that occurred.
So when Frank Alexander won't play ball, the only move Death Row had was to bribe the victim. That would be Orlando Anderson.
Suge would do stuff that could have got his probation violated. And to get the witnesses to retract their beliefs or their statements, you give them money. It's how America works.
And here's the crack in the narrative. At that same time, they are in Vegas saying Orlando Anderson was a killer. Don't you think Anderson knew they were trying to hang him in Vegas?
But it didn't matter. The judge didn't believe Anderson anyway, and everyone wants to focus on Anderson as why Knight's parole was revoked. And sure, they got Knight for the Anderson beating, but that's not what got him in front of the judge. The move that got Knight off the playing field was a call from someone who knew exactly where he was. It was a call made to his probation officer telling him Knight went out of the country.
Because there's two things that I always say, being from the ghetto, either they're gonna take the money from you, which you'll be an OJ. If they can't take the money from you, they take you from the money. The only way they take you from the money is by you dying, death, or in prison.
So for a while, Knight was out of the way, and somehow all of Knight's property made its way into Reggie's hands.
I don't know if I've got it sitting in front of me here. I'll show you this. You're gonna love this. This is the grant deed for the Wilshire building. That building was transferred into the name of Reggie Wright by Michelet, who called herself his attorney in fact. If you notice, it transfers the building to Reggie Wright, but Suge Knight's signature is nowhere on this grant deed.
Reggie had a game plan, and he made it very, very clear that he wanted to take over Death Row Records. Make no mistake about that.
You wanted to just make me security when I owned everything. Had your buildings, the 5 cars, the house where Little Suge, the Sosa, and Stormy lived. Reggie's name.
So while Reggie Jr. was busy putting all of Knight's property in his name, news came that Mr. Knight may be appealing his case. The problem was that Orlando Anderson may not be a friendly witness this time. Knight was granted an appeal in April of 1998. But by then, Orlando Anderson had done several interviews on television denying charges against him. And 2 months before that, in February of 1998, Anderson actually did a deposition on the accusations. It looked like Anderson was not going to be as cooperative as he had been.
From 1995 to date, have you ever ridden in a white Cadillac?
No.
Do you know anyone who owns a white Cadillac?
No.
So Knight appeals, and that was April of 1998, and Death Row realizes Anderson may not play ball. Guess what happens the very next month?
When they say the shooting happened there at the car wash hamburger stand off Alonzo and Willowbrook, that area. But he was found on the 1 street just over. Yeah. And the first person on the scene, Andy, was Reggie Wright. Imagine that. First person, man. And he was shocked when he saw myself and Pilcher there at first. The first unit to show up, undercover narcotics officers.
Wow.
You know?
I did not know.
Yeah, and he was dead. They shot him up good. That's why I say there's conspiracy there where possibly he followed and called, you know, okay, he's over here. Let's do him in. Let's get it done.
Wow.
All right? So then there's another write-up that Ray Richardson got a dying declaration from Orlando Anderson. And
what he said,
funny.
Tupac.
Something like that. Yeah. Okay.
There are many good reasons, including his own words, to believe several actions taken by Reggie Wright Jr. were suspicious. But even if Wright's actions on the night of September 7, 1996 were not directly connected to the shooting of Tupac, it doesn't mean he and his half-baked bodyguard company were out of the woods yet. I wonder if he and Knight knew they may have been on the hook for criminal negligence. Let's just be honest and say the security for Tupac was a joke. But you need to understand that criminal negligence is really a thing. If you cross the line from sloppy to reckless, you can go to prison for it.
And so let's talk for a moment about negligence and how it might have criminal impact. A parent leaves a baby in a car seat, in the car, windows rolled up when it's 100 degrees outside. The baby unfortunately dies and the parent is charged with an act of criminal negligence. That's one example. Now, the parent can have 1,000 reasons why they did what they did. In fact, they might say they didn't intend for it to be the way it was. The courts don't care. It's what is referred to as a duty of care. And again, it's kind of hard to describe it, but when you're looking at it and observing it and examining it, you can figure it out. You don't figure it out sometimes until after the fact, but you can figure it out.
Negligence is violation of a duty that you owe to others, imposed by the conduct that you're engaged in. You're driving a car, you have a duty to the rest of the world not to run a red light and have a car accident, not to go through a crosswalk and run over somebody. So you owe a duty of care to others to not do things. So if you're a doctor, you have a duty of care to your patients, to perform up to what would be community norms or standards.
Recently, actor Alec Baldwin was given a loaded prop gun, which he used and shot a camera person to death. Could there be an act of criminal negligence there?
So if you're an armorer, you have an obligation to not have loaded weapons on the job site without giving a lot of notice to people that this weapon is live.
If I would have been on the set of the movie Rust with Alec Baldwin, who I know a little bit, nobody would have got shot because he didn't have me on the movie set or someone like me that had a strict standard of the safety of the set is more important than anything else.
Obviously, we're here for Mr. Costner, but yeah, is there any part where someone's going to be pointing a gun at or around his direction?
Who said that? You did on the chair? Yeah. One has action, one doesn't have action. Yeah.
Ouais. David, donc attends. Là, on en fait peut-être une.
Because I would have turned and said, who's this who's never been in the military, never been in law enforcement, never had any government agency say, you are now an expert in firearms?
You don't do that. You violated your duty by not giving notice to others. And if somebody picks up the gun and they use it, you're part of that chain of tragedy and you're negligent. Because if you'd done what you're supposed to do, nobody would have been shot.
I've never had a bodyguard assignment. Everybody always say, you a security, but no, I was always with you, make it happen. I was really Shug's right hand.
The fact of the matter is that everybody in his entourage has blood on their hands, period. There's always excuses after the fact.
One of Reggie's problems was that Reggie didn't have the executive protection background that we all had.
So let's get real here. By his own words, he wasn't focused on and frankly, didn't care about the bodyguard problem. He knew about the radio issue, but didn't fix that either. And the amazing thing is that he admitted to the 2023 grand jury that he went to the MGM, saw the crowd, knew about the security issues, and just bailed. Of course, he's also tried to walk back the gun problem by saying it only applied to Club 662. They're told they can't have guns. Michael Moore refused, and he was pulled off of Tupac.
Frank and I would speak up about it. We would say, hey, Reggie, you should do it this way, and this is why. Or you should do it this way, and this is why. And I think he was so busy being the boss that his employees couldn't tell him how or what to do when all we were trying to do was educate him a little bit.
Reggie told all hip hop that I never said They told us not to carry our guns in that meeting. He said that in my book, I wrote that I didn't carry my gun on purpose. Let me tell you, Reggie, I did write that we were told not to carry guns in my book, Got Your Back. You need to get your glasses on and read it.
The bad guy is not willing to trade his life for the life of the target. That would be a bomber. The bad guy, the majority of the time, he wants to shoot him and get away. He can't do that if 16 guys are shooting back at him. He's either going to be dead or they're going to catch him. Point being that when you take away the firearms, you take away the weapons, when you make all your guys work unarmed, it is a bright red flashing warning light that you need to turn to your client, Tupac Shakur, and say, hey, Tupac, this plan is. It's like they're setting you up to be killed. It could get you killed. I refuse to do it because I care more about your safety than keeping my job.
I've never had a bodyguard assignment. Everybody always say, you a security, but no, I was always with you, making happen. I was really Shug's right hand.
There's a movie called The Bodyguard with Kevin Costner. And as you know, I've been Kevin Costner's personal bodyguard. Kevin is filming a TV movie where he's playing himself directing the movie. I led a 7-man protective detail, and we were originally told just have one guy stand outside the trailer. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. This is Kevin Costner. He's a huge movie star, huge TV star. That's the first order I had to disobey for his safety. They threatened to fire me several times. We want one guy to stand at the trailer. No, I'm bringing 7 guys.
There were every gun-toting crook, you know, in that echelon of people.
That's what I was doing. I went to MGM, saw that shit was hectic and all that. Frank and Tupac, I'm gonna be honest, Tupac called, cussing, going on. And that was the last thing Tupac ever said to me in life.
The security was a mess in Vegas, and he's throwing his hands up, blaming everyone else for not telling him things. You are the director of security for a multi-million-dollar label. How is it not on you to communicate with your own employees?
All the people in my group at one time or another have got together as a group and told me, let's go talk to the client. Their plan is dangerous and it's going to get somebody killed. And we went and spoke to them as a client, as a group, directly to the client. That if they would have done that, I believe that Tupac Shakur would have kept them. He would have changed the plan back to something safe. And most importantly, he would have come to a realization that Reggie Wright Jr. did not have his best intentions at heart, did not have his true safety at heart, and in fact, were making decisions that could get him killed.
And in fact, it did get him killed.
It's clear he cared more about Club 662 than the life of Tupac.
Nobody cared about Pac having the right amount of security at all, period.
No one cared.
It was not mentioned at all.
No one cared.
You know.
Do you really think that Frank Alexander would ditch his gun if the only place he couldn't have it was Club 662? And if not having a gun was so important, then why would they pull Michael Moore off Tupac when he was the only one vocal about not ditching his gun, and take him over to the club where no guns were allowed?
It just didn't add up. It didn't add up. Reggie was so weird. I'm gonna tell you another thing. Let's look at Reggie's thing. Why would Reggie? He never, ever went to that club. He turns it over to Al every time. He turns it over to you. Right. He turns it over to Marcus the time before that. It was never there. And he was never there. Why was he so insistent on being there? And I asked him. When I first got to the club, I said, Reggie, why are you here? Aren't you going to shoot? No, I got to take care of things at the club. And guess what? What did he do different? Nothing. Nothing. Nothing at all. He did nothing. He just was there.
I, as most people did, felt bad about him being assassinated. And the fact of the matter is that I've never once heard publicly the real and total breakdown that happened. What I've heard is everybody making excuses to make themselves look good. Well, they told me this. Well, they told me that. Well, this happened or that happened. That's why I'm going to shift the blame to someone else.
I received a call from Reggie about 11:15 at night. I mean, he was just, you know, a tape was worth $1 million. If I'd had that tape, just cursing me out about how I should have got on the plane and this and that, and, you know, Shug's upset, all these people down here, and, you know, it's only Frank with Tupac. And so I said to him, I said, well, you have all these cops over here at 662. Why don't you have the cops over there with him? And Reggie was, I could tell, I know Reggie well enough, and you know I know you well enough, that he was agitated. There was something in his voice. And my statement to him is, why would you just have Frank with him when you got all these other cops? And just Kev, he just don't know. This is their #1 artist. I mean, he's as high profile as they get. You know, and you're paying for all the security. I mean, you got all these guys at the club.
What is your current relationship with Reggie Wright, head of Right Way Security?
There is none. He was harsh in his firing me.
I actually left Death Row on my own accord.
No, I haven't been in contact with him. I haven't seen Reggie now in about 3 years or more than that.
I have no relationship with Reggie Wright at this time, nor do I plan to.
I guess the way to sum Reggie up is he was just selfish, and he didn't treat us right.
Reggie is not honest, and I want to leave it at that.
We were a tight-knit group, and Reggie didn't see that. He didn't appreciate that, and he tried to come between it many times by paying someone a little bit more than the next person, or cheating somebody on this and on that.
And one thing I knew, I mean, obviously this whole thing was starting to fall apart. You know, like I said, at one point or another, Reggie and I were like brothers. Okay, at one point or another, there's nothing I wouldn't do for Reggie. And I think vice versa at one time. But Reggie always told me he was so far in now, there's no way turning around. Something's wrong. The pieces of this whole situation, it just doesn't fit.
It's curious to me that you have 4 of the bodyguards closest to Tupac, and somehow not one of them left on good terms, and not one of them had anything good to say about Wright.
And with the exit of Frank Alexander, Kenneth Archer, and Les Golden, it looked as if Death Row was going to step up to a different type of police officer for its security.
I was working the Kevin Gaines shooting when I was contacted by an officer named Ken Knox out of, I think it was either West Valley Division or Devonshire Division. Knox had heard I was investigating an officer-involved shooting, and I think he'd heard my victim in this shooting was working with Death Row Records in some capacity.
I mean, you're right that Kenneth Knox is probably the most underrepresented character in this story, because he was the very first guy to get on the fact that there were all these cops working for Death Row Records. He sort of stumbled into it. He was the senior lead officer, which is, it's an elite position, and there's just one at every LAPD station. And he was responding to citizen complaints about activity at Death Row's studios. So he's back and forth with this guy, and the guy says, well, you know, one of the people who sits here is one of your own guys. What?
Anybody that says that LAPD officers were not working security for Death Row Records is 100% wrong, period. You had Chief Bernard Parks on camera, specifically even naming David Mack and Rafael Perez as 2 officers that were working security for Death Row Records. That's indisputable, okay? You've got numerous employees that we did interviews with that stated, yes, these police officers were always around Death Row Records. They had all these after parties from award shows. Wherever they went, there was no better relationship than having a cop with you that has a gun and a badge.
He's finding out that there are a number of other LAPD officers working for Death Row Records, and that their higher-ups that already know it. It's already been, he goes to his superior, who says, yeah, we know that. They shut him down, basically. They got him alone in a room and threatened him and told him his career was over. And, you know, the one thing he did do was pass it on to Russ Poole.
Reggie Wright Jr. was the head of Right Way Securities and provided security for Death Row Records. for him to say that no LAPD officers, other than a couple that we've mentioned, that he was not aware of any of these other officers, such as Mack or Perez or Durden or Martin or Gaines, provided security at death row, Reggie's either the worst manager of all time of providing security, or he's just a liar. Or both in this case, to be honest with you. He is. And it's a fact.
With the LAPD now officially running interference for cops working for death row, and Reggie Wright converting death row assets away from Marion Knight, and a narrative blaming Orlando Anderson for the Tupac killing on the rise, there looked to be no stopping the untouchable death row records.
Y'all know what I perpetrated or put out on that particular day, but you don't really know me, you know? So you don't know what I'm capable of doing or not doing.